This video is from the first 4 hours or 20 levels of gameplay, so I'm gonna just play the Sorceress because that seems like the easiest character to get a lot of gear and do a lot of big damage, and big damage is really important when some of the attacks that the enemies have are just gonna punch you in the face. The character creator is really basic. From what I saw before, when this game wasn't in Phoenix mode in its original Steam edition, there was a lot more customizability. You could mess around with the dimensions of the characters. Some reviewers complained that it was a little bit too sexist, so I can understand why they wanted to make it more static, but it seems like there's really not that many options available anymore to what there originally was, and that's kind of disappointing. I really like when games have that level of customizability of characters so that you don't end up with a bunch of cookie cutters. You can make thousands of combinations through unique eyes and whatnot, but really what it comes down to is what your hair looks like, what your body shape is. As you can see that the sliders do almost nothing. You can slightly change height, you can give them slightly bigger heads, but it's really not noticeable. Something definitely worth mentioning is that some of the load screens take a horrendously long time, like this one. I waited for quite a while for this one to load, and even though I'm running a laptop, it's a pretty high-end gaming laptop, and I almost never see loading screens like this, so this is a problem with the game itself, and that's really frustrating. This game does have little incentives like the daily rewards. It doesn't really push the cash shop on you too much, which is nice. I really hate games that have the instant open up the game, here's the cash shop, which, from what I'm aware, Area Games, which is the people who published this game, is kind of guilty of. One nice thing about questing in this game, I find, and I really, really like this aspect of this game, is that all of the quests are either kill 2 or 3 things or gather 2 or 3 things, and the gathering loot chances is almost 100% all the times. In the case that it hasn't been 100%, it's been 50%, and it's been pretty much guaranteed. So questing goes really fast, and that's very nice, especially because it's in pseudo instances. There's one aspect about this game, and it's this soul collecting sort of system that gives you some extra skills to use. There's a short quest around it that basically says, go out and use one of the skills and compress these souls. The thing about it is that this really isn't necessary for the game. I played beyond this quest through 20 levels on 2 characters without ever touching it, and I almost never died. The only time I ever died was without potions. So I really don't think that this soul system needs to be in the game. In most games I play, I try to figure out if I can play this game with the UI off, like I'm putting here. So the reason I do this is because I want to have this available for streaming on Twitch, and I want to see, can I see the hitboxes of the enemies, can I see my HP, can I see what damage is hitting me, is there any sort of screen effect that I can use to determine, am I going to die? I think this is really helpful, especially in PvP. Unfortunately, very few games have this as availability. You can see that there's no little hitboxes around the enemies there. There was no sort of hint that I was being damaged. But fortunately, you can use your skills, so that is also kind of important, because sometimes with turning off the UI, you can't use the skills. The auction house is available in a whole lot of cities, any sort of premium currency, everything's very available, everything's sortable. You can go through these menus and look for everything for your class, you can sort by level. There's a lot of smaller free-to-play games where it is cash locked, or it is premium currency only, or it's completely unreasonable. You can't search for things within your level, and it can be really janky, but here, the auction house system is really well done, and I really appreciate that. Another thing this game has is a weird sort of food hunger system where you have to eat so much and it increases your attack power and stamina and whatnot. I really, just like the soul system, I've kind of mostly ignored this. I've let my energy run down to 0 a lot of times on my rogue mostly. I tried to put points into it on this run on the sorceress, but it really didn't seem to make any kind of a difference. If it does make a difference, I'm sure it's more endgame, but right now it doesn't really seem that important. You can learn to cook. Kind of questionable how exactly that's very helpful or beneficial, but it doesn't really seem to do anything that much right now. One thing about this game is that when you join, you are automatically put into a Newbie Guild. This Newbie Guild gives you a 2% bonus to experience and gold, and seemingly maybe other tiny benefits. But with the sheer amount of experience that you get in this game, the fact that you can get one quest done and level up once, or even I think once I leveled up twice, 2% really doesn't matter. You can leave this guild if you want, but maybe you like the 2% extra gold, even though gold in this game really doesn't do anything for you either, because everything is so expensive and you get so little of it. For grinding, at the very least, monsters give negligible experience compared to what you need to level. So really the only way to get through leveling in this game is going to be through questing. Maybe later in the game through PvP as well, but I never got to a high enough level to actually access PvP. So really, I don't see the guild as very important or useful. I think that you just want to quest, and if you don't like having the little noob title above your head, drop the guild. You can find these boxes all around the world, and they give you a little bit of a buff. The buff that you get from them can give you speed or strength. Up near the corner of the map on your screen, you can see what buffs are currently active. This is a speed buff that lasts for about 5 minutes. Some of the other buffs seem to last for maybe only 2 minutes or somewhere in between. And it's really interesting that this game has these boxes. There's other boxes around the world that might drop you a loot chest, or they might summon a rare kind of specialty spawn that will also typically drop some kind of a loot box. The spawns seem to drop mostly potions and scrolls, which are both healing items, and the chests sometimes will actually have like real loot, gear for your class, or gear not for your class. It's kind of random, but I do really like having the random boxes around random loot chests. Is something I really miss from World of Warcraft. I haven't seen a lot of games that have random loot chests, and the ones that do, like Black Desert Online, are really sort of fought over. They're really janky. They always require some kind of a key that you can never get except through the cash shop. This is one part of the game that's really important. At level 10, you get to choose whatever class specialty you want to be. In this case, it's Fire Mage or Ice Mage, and I chose Ice Mage. You get an automatic little skill right away, and then later on you get to choose between these 3 skills every couple of levels. Some of the skills, like on the rogue class, don't work together, and it tells you that they won't work together, so it almost seems like a kind of linear, non-linear, psychological sort of system. My biggest gripes with this game is the pseudo-instances, and here's an example of why pseudo-instances really suck. Because in this case, in this game in particular, it decides that it's going to make these kind of invisible walls where if you're in combat, even if you're way higher level than the enemies, if you aggro anything at all, while you're aggroed, you cannot leave the pseudo-instance. If you're a high-level player and you want to save 100 silver, which can be kind of a pain to actually get 100 silver just to use a warp, and there's really not that many warps, it's really frustrating to have to go through these pseudo-instances and get locked out by these walls. I really like solo dungeons. I am always looking for games that you can do solo if you choose not to, or if you're not playing during prime time. If you don't like that lifestyle, solo dungeons is the way to go, and I've been looking a long time for a game that has a good solo dungeon. Now, unfortunately, Echo of Soul doesn't really have great solo dungeoning from the two that I've seen. This one is one you'll probably spend a lot of time in. It's got minimal enemies, the enemies are fairly easy, there's a little bit of interrupting that you have to do sometimes, and the nice thing is that you can actually see the cast bars of enemies you don't actually have highlighted. Unfortunately, tabbing in dungeons is also a little bit wonky because tab doesn't necessarily go to the nearest, it cycles between everything that's visible on the range of your character. Because this game likes to force your character to move to find that target, because the game always faces your target and always tries to make an ability land. It will actually start running and you'll have your back turned towards other enemies that you were fighting because your character is automatically trying to go and fight this enemy that you can't see, that you didn't even intend to. I really don't like that. I really wish I could change that in settings. I've looked through the settings, I can't find anything for that. It's really kind of unfortunate that you can't mess around with the tab targeting, and in dungeons at least I would recommend manually clicking to tab target between enemies. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like you're ever going to fight more than 2 or 3 at a time, but again, I've only been through the first 2 dungeons, so that might not be the case in future instances. You engage the boss, unlike a lot of other instanced games. You will not aggro those enemies that are waiting on the sidelines. This boss here, see, it's a mini boss and it just completely dies. Even between normal mode and hero mode, which you unlock pretty instantly after doing a normal mode run. Every boss, even the mini bosses, drop a little loot box that gives you 2 random pieces of gear for your class. Sometimes, because gear is spec locked for whatever reason, you'll get either 2 pieces of gear that aren't for your spec or for the opposite spec, or you'll get 1 piece that isn't for your spec and 1 piece that is. Usually they're greens on normal and blues on hero. I think on legendary it's pretty much the same. Legendary just pits you in a group of 2 other people and goes through almost what seems like normal mode, but it drops a lot more chests. So this is the boss for this layer. She has 2 attacks, one is a point blank AoE and one is a targeted AoE, as well as just regular white attacks. This point blank AoE is really easy to dodge. She can also use it as a targeted, sort of the same skill, but it's almost always point blank. And the reason I chose to have 2 dodge skills is because of the cooldown. So with 2 dodge skills, I can just constantly avoid her AoE just by my buttons. And there, she's dead. Overall, I like the solo dungeon system. I think it works pretty well, and I'm definitely willing to recommend this game just based on the solo dungeons. Another aspect of this game is there are group quests. For small groups, you can solo them. The mobs are quite a lot harder than your regular mobs. You'll have to do a lot of dodging and possibly some kiting, which in a game that makes you stand still when you're attacking can be a little bit problematic. You'll also have to wait around for them if they're heavily farmed. Fortunately, this one spawned right away, although on 2 occasions I did try waiting for it, and after 2 or 3 minutes it didn't show up, and so I just left and went on and did other quests. This is a level 10 Bob, and it's still taking a while to kill, even though I'm level 14 or 15 at this point, and have dungeon gear. So these quests are nice because if you are not in a party, you still get the loot and you still get the kill. The unfortunate thing is that this doesn't apply to all mobs, it only applies to these special group quests, and I really wish that the developers would have made it an all mob feature. Apart from solo dungeons, this is one of the most fun parts of the game for me. I really like fighting these sort of super elite mobs that are meant for groups. They're really tough, they really punch hard. This one could probably 3-shot me if it wanted to. It's a little bit janky because the hitbox of its attacks are quite a lot larger than actually he is. So during this battle, sometimes I'll be quite far away and he'll still end up hitting me. Having these fights without a lot of potions can be really dangerous, although it is possible. Near the end of this fight with this mob in particular, I ran out of potions and just had to kite it just out of range and keep pegging it. When I fought this on my rogue, I died twice, but with the mage it was a lot easier because of the double dodge. It takes about 2 to 5 minutes to kill these. Sometimes you can get lucky with ones that don't have really super high range attacks, and you can kill much higher level ones in about 10 minutes. And if no one shows up, well, that just kind of shows how this game doesn't really have that many people on it. But otherwise, it is still fun to do this, and I think it really increases the playability for the solo aspect. So even if this game died, even if no one was playing it, you could still get really far and have a lot of fun with killing these super elites or doing the solo dungeons, and I really appreciate that part about the game. One thing to mention about the mob's HP bar is that it shows these buffs under it, so if you mouse over them, you can see what kind of modifiers the boss has on it. This is similar to a lot of ARPG games like Diablo 2 or possibly Diablo 3 that show what kind of things it's immune to, what kind of things maybe it's weak to, what kind of things might have like super strength, or might cause poison damage, or it might cause some sort of binding effect on attack. This is really important because it might show the kind of things like in the upcoming clip where the enemy has a super shield until you use a potion on it. I thought this section was really funny because there's this group of a couple people trying to kill this mob that you're supposed to use a weakening potion on, and it looks like they've managed to get him down to almost dead without using the weakening potion. I'm not sure if they didn't know that you had to use a weakening potion on him to make him really easy, or if they were just trying to kill him. Either way, it's kind of nice to know that if you interact with mobs, you won't really interrupt or kill steal or anything with them. So you can still help out other people who might not know how to play the game, or maybe they're just doing something really silly and it won't really cause them any ill effect. As an explorer, I really want a game that I can just interact with the environment completely and not run into a bunch of these invisible walls in areas that they shouldn't be. I can understand invisible walls in areas that they don't want you to have access to, but these two areas are clearly connected. You should just be able to jump off of these rocks and get down to the area below. In some areas of the game, you can do this. You can jump off of somewhat higher cliffs. I think there might even be fall damage, but here there's no way to get down, and this is really disappointing. There's other areas of the game, like around little fences, that you just can't jump over, even though your character can clearly jump that high, and it's really unnecessary and just disappointing that they would have to put all of these little pseudo-instances and invisible walls and really make the game feel Like, they don't want it to be open world when they're clearly advertising it as open world. For the rest of this video, I'm just going to talk about the pros and cons of the game. Starting with the pros, the solo dungeons are pretty good overall for a free-to-play game. Although they're lacking in enemy numbers and the combat gaps make it kind of hard to enjoy, I think there's room for improvement. The important thing is that these dungeons give the best early game gear and a decent amount of experience. I give the solo dungeon experience a 7 out of 10. Combat type. Always facing the enemy can be good for some players who don't like the feel of dynamic combat. Although I prefer dynamic combat personally, where you need to aim yourself, I'm trying to give this game a neutral review, and I can see that a lot of players might enjoy it. I give it a 5 out of 10 just because there's no option to turn it off, and that makes it detrimental to PvP. Super elites are soloable. This is really important because it can be hard to find a group for dungeons, let alone questing. The game is also extremely low population, so having mobs like this, not Instagib players, is really important. I give this a 7 out of 10 only because there needs to be some improvement between animation size and actual attack ranges. No Instagib. Speaking of Instagib, after playing both a close-range melee DPS and a caster class, I'm confident saying that no class in this game will probably suffer from instagibbing, which is dying horribly because your class is squishy, and the boss abilities are sort of broken. This is a problem with so many other games where lacking a healer or tank automatically means failure or death. Even with skills that lock your character in place in this game, you can basically solo the game. I give this a 10 out of 10. Auto potions. While I wish I could turn this feature off outside of dungeons or between super elites, it is really an interesting feature. I give this feature a 9 out of 10. Cons. Seemingly useless features. Between the instant guild, the soul collection, and the food system, this game seems to have a lot of features that were well intended but just ended up taking up space. I can easily play the game without ever thinking about any of these features and not lose out. I give these features a 4 out of 10 because the latter two are probably worthwhile at endgame, but because this is a first impressions video, I'm really not impressed by these features. Low population. It doesn't seem like there's anyone on, and I think that might be in part because the game isn't well advertised. It's also not on Steam when its predecessor was. This is Area Games' fault, probably. Because of this, finding dungeon groups is exceedingly slow. I waited on 3 different occasions for over 20 minutes for a group to form, even on a group dungeon that was assigned via a quest. However, because this game is pretty much soloable, I'll give this a 5 out of 10. Pseudo-Instancing and invisible walls. The use of copious invisible walls where there should be open transition between 2 areas is really off-putting. One of my requirements for an open-world MMO is the ability to jump, and although you can jump in this game, it's often hindered. The feeling of this game's map design between this and the aggro-locked pseudo-instancing is probably the factor that's going to make me quit the game in the end. It just feels too much like vanilla Guild Wars 1 or Phantasy Star Universe, which, while I love the nostalgia feeling, it just seems like something that doesn't belong in a 2018 reboot of a 2015 game. I give these walls a 1 out of 10. Target chase. This was probably the oddest feature I've seen in this game. The fact that you can tab target something through a wall and have your character automatically try to get in range is really strange and highly problematic, especially in this game that doesn't really have an auto find feature otherwise. I'm sure this leads to a lot of mispulls and can be really detrimental by forcing players to have to manually tab between nearby units via the mouse, rather than making tab key options in settings. I give this feature a 1 out of 10. General character scaling. One thing I noticed when I entered a city was a player with 40,000 HP. Between level 1 and 20 on both my characters, my HP really didn't scale that much, starting around 100, ending up around 300. I see this as probably balanced pre-endgame, But once you get to endgame, it becomes really unbalanced, where gear will quickly outclass skill. While I didn't get to PvP myself, I see this being problematic if gear isn't normalized in PvP instances. I won't give it a rating because I haven't seen the PvP, but I don't really expect it to be good. That all being said, it seems like it's probably a pretty fair game. Although it's free to play and it seems a little bit more old-fashioned than you might expect out of a 2017 or a 2018 game, or even a 2015 game for that matter, it's still kind of enjoyable. There's a little bit of a problem with lag when you get around to the main cities, but you'll probably never actually be in the main cities anyways. So I'm personally going to give this game a little bit more of an extra shot before I uninstall it, but I think it might be worth picking up and trying for yourself. My name is Vazarati, and this is my first impressions video ever, so if you liked it, give me a like, give me a subscribe. I'll try to continue making more of these videos either way.